Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Little Red Riding Hood who lived in a small cottage at the edge of a forest with her mother. Her grandmother lived alone on the other side of the forest. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to take a basket of treats through the woods to her sick grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood set off through the woods, carrying her basket of treats for her grandmother. The trees towered overhead, their branches seeming to reach out towards her as she walked along the winding forest path. In the shadows, she thought she glimpsed flickering shapes keeping pace with her. The further she went into the forest, the darker it seemed to get. Little Red Riding Hood started to feel nervous being all alone out there. Was someone following her? What was that snapping sound nearby? She clutched her red cloak tightly around her and walked a little faster. As Little Red Riding Hood hurried through the deep, dark woods, a wolf was spying on her from behind a tree up ahead. This was no ordinary wolf, this was the big bad wolf, a cunning and dangerous beast who loved to gobble up lost travelers in the forest. When he saw Little Red Riding Hood approaching with her basket of treats, the big bad wolf licked his chops hungrily. He decided he would leap out and swallow her whole in one gulp. The big bad wolf jumped onto the path right in front of Little Red Riding Hood, snarling ferociously. "Where do you think you're going, little girl?" he asked in a gravelly voice. Little Red Riding Hood shrieked in terror. The basket of treats tumbled from her hands. But instead of running away or begging for mercy, she balled up her little fists and yelled, "Get out of my way, you big bully!" The big bad wolf was shocked. No one had ever stood up to him before. All his victims just ran away or fainted in fear. He barked out a cruel laugh. "Foolish child, I'm going to gobble you up," he snarled as he took a step towards Little Red Riding Hood. But she refused to back down. As the wolf lunged towards her, Little Red Riding Hood swiftly pulled off her red cloak and flung it over the wolf's head, blinding him. "Take that, you big brute," she yelled. The big bad wolf thrashed around, trying to get the red cloak off his head. But Little Red Riding Hood wasn't done yet. She gave him a hard kick right in his hairy shin, making him howl in pain. Then she punched him right in his slobbering snout. "Why, you little brat!" the big bad wolf roared. He finally tore away the cloak and glared at Little Red Riding Hood with murderous eyes. "Now you've made me really mad. I'm going to gobble you up for sure." Little Red Riding Hood trembled in fear as the enraged big bad wolf stalked towards her. What could she do now? Suddenly, she had an idea. She pointed behind the wolf and shouted, "Oh no! A hunter with an axe!" The big bad wolf whirled around, giving Little Red Riding Hood just enough time to scamper up a tree and perch on a high branch, out of the wolf's reach. The big bad wolf soon realized he'd been tricked again. He ran to the bottom of the tree and started huffing and puffing, trying to blow Little Red Riding Hood down from the branch. But she held on tightly, not budging an inch. The big bad wolf paced below the tree, growling furiously. "Come down here and fight fair, you little coward," he bellowed. Never, shouted Little Red Riding Hood stubbornly. Suddenly, the big bad wolf had another nasty idea. He scrambled up the tree after Little Red Riding Hood, his sharp claws digging into the bark. Little Red Riding Hood gasped and clung tightly to her branch. But now the big bad wolf was face to face with her, baring his razor-sharp teeth as he leaned out over the branch. "I've got you now," he snarled triumphantly. Little Red Riding Hood trembled and squeezed her eyes shut. But just as the big bad wolf was about to gobble her up, Little Red Riding Hood kicked out as hard as she could, catching the wolf right in the snout again. Howling in surprise and pain, the big bad wolf lost his grip on the tree and plummeted all the way down to the ground below. Thud! Little Red Riding Hood peered down to see the wolf sprawled in the dirt, dazed but still growling. Luckily, the fall seemed to have weakened him. Little Red Riding Hood seized her chance. As quick as a flash, she climbed down the tree and looked around for something she could use to capture the weakened wolf. She spotted a well nearby and had another idea. She grabbed a rope and bucket that happened to be sitting nearby. Quickly, she lowered the bucket into the well, filling it with water. Then, just as the big bad wolf was staggering back to his feet, growling and shaking his fuzzy head, Little Red Riding Hood heaved the whole bucket right over him. Splash! The big bad wolf sputtered angrily as he stood there, soaked to the skin and angrier than ever. But before he could stop her, Little Red Riding Hood was on him again, tying and knotting the rope tightly around him. No matter how furiously the big bad wolf thrashed and snarled, soon he was all trussed up, unable to move an inch. Little Red Riding Hood stepped back, dusting off her hands. "Not so big and bad now, are you?" she said. The wolf just glared at her silently, knowing he was beaten. Little Red Riding Hood picked up her basket and continued on her way to Grandma's house, leaving the tied-up wolf roaring furiously behind her. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood had no more trouble from the big bad wolf whenever she went through the woods. And the legend of Little Red Riding Hood spread far and wide, the brave little girl in the red cloak who beat the big bad wolf.